Hey guys, today is May 11th, 2018. Welcome to my channel, Alien Society. Before I begin, of course, I want to say thank you for those who are subscribers, new subscribers to my channel. Thank you for those who stick around that wanting to know more of my videos. I will continue to be posting more videos, of course. It's just I took a little break because there's other things I have to do. The story that I want to present to you guys is about Imhotep. I know many of you have seen many people's interpretation of the story between him and Joseph of Egypt, son of Jacob. Okay? Now, first I'm going to tell you the similarities between the two men. And then I'm going to tell you the things that separate them that people start saying that it's not one and the same guy. Okay? So, let me tell you the similarities first. Not saying that this is going to be something you should accept, but it's something that you should consider that it does make sense. All right. Both were not of royal lineage. Okay? Neither was Imhotep, neither was Jacob. Joseph. They were not of royal lineage. At least that's what we know of. Both interpreted dreams to a pharaoh. Okay? Now, Joseph's pharaoh is unnamed. It doesn't tell us the name of that pharaoh. It makes you wonder why they didn't mention the name. Okay? So that's kind of odd that these people knew so much, and they've been in Egypt several times, that they would not know this pharaoh by name. Imhotep's pharaoh, and this is the way I have to say it, okay? His name was Josier. Now, yeah, there is some form of similarities between Josier and Joseph, but I don't know. It just doesn't add up to some degrees. So the more similarities would be between him, Imhotep, and Joseph. All right. Like I said, they both interpreted dreams for the pharaoh. Both were not of royal lineage. Okay? They both predicted what would happen, okay, in 7 years. Or during 7 years. They both were chosen to be vizier of Egypt, that is second in command. Now remember, if you're familiar with Egyptian historical records, you will realize that the ones by royal lineage are the ones that get these positions, okay? So for some reason, this man, okay, these two men, whether you believe they're the same person or not, were chosen even though they were not of royal blood. So, like I said, they were chosen by the pharaoh to be vizier of Egypt. Then we have that they both died at the same age. So that was kind of interesting also, that they both died the same age. I think it's 110, if I'm not mistaken. Now, there's also where he was priest, Imhotep that is, priest of On, Heliopolis, right, as the Greeks call it. And if you remember, Joseph's wife was from Heliopolis. Okay? And her father was a priest of Heliopolis. In the Bible it says On, or it also say Heliopolis. But it's the same place. This is a priest of Ra. Okay? Now, I did try to look for the name Zaphenath-Paneah, the name that supposedly this pharaoh gave to Joseph. The unnamed pharaoh. I mean, there is nowhere in the Egyptian records that you would find that name. Now, I'm not saying that just because you can't find it, that that's not a real name, because we would never know the actual truth to that. We can only assume that, you know, they probably just bits and pieces here and there, they told truth of it, and some of it not. Now, of course, here, Imhotep was deified by the people, okay, years later after his death. Of course, that didn't happen with Joseph. No one deified him. So this is where people start saying, no, it's not one and the same person. Also, because they didn't have, according to what people believe, that they're not having the same father or the same mother, because Imhotep's father, according to historical records, the Egyptian records, his name was Canofer. And Joseph's father, of course, if you know the Bible, his name was Jacob. His mother was Rachel, okay? That's Joseph's mother. Imhotep's mother, however, is not Rachel. It's Karadu Ankh. I'm sorry if I mispronounced it. But just because you don't see the names that are similar to each other, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're not the same person. Because once again, these two men were not of royal lineage. So it makes you think how these two guys made the same prediction, were chosen by this Pharaoh, okay? Of course, Joseph was named by given the position by an unknown Pharaoh. Imhotep was given the position by a known Pharaoh. And you can draw many conclusions from this story. Now, some people say that Imhotep was one of 12 children. Now, you can dispute that if you like. It doesn't matter what I think of it. Just like Jacob, right? Jacob's son Joseph. He was one of 12. One of 12, yes. So, once again, we have the, people's thought about it, and they start saying whether, again, that doesn't make sense. But, once again, when you put those two stories together, all right, just forget about the fact that their names don't add up when it's in regards to the father, mother of both men. When it comes to the prophecy, okay, that shows you that something is going on. Either the Hebrews borrowed this historical record from the Egyptians, okay, or it was an actual event. But we can't say that they're not one and the same. You can, but I would say more of an argument would be that they are the same man, considering how they were not of royal lineage, and they were chosen by a pharaoh who obviously gave him the position of vizier of Egypt, when in fact he didn't pick a royal, of royal blood to be in line. Now, of course, many people could say that Joseph afterwards was a pharaoh, and but okay, let's just not think about that part, because many people are not going to accept that Joseph was a pharaoh. And the reason being is because in the biblical record of the Hebrews, it doesn't mention anything about Joseph being a pharaoh. Now, we can also argue about this story, and we can also argue the story about Moses. Another story that seems to be either borrowed from the Egyptian records, or it was an actual event that took place. I know many of you have heard it before, okay, about Tutmosis III. Now, once again, it doesn't mean that these stories are true. You can draw your own conclusions to what you want to believe in terms of these stories. But you have to consider that these stories are similar, and it makes you want to think like, wait a minute, why are they similar? Okay, so I will get back to Imhotep, of course, but let me talk to you about Tutmosis III. Tutmosis III was also raised not by his mother, just as Joseph was not raised by his real mother. He was raised by a princess of an Egyptian king, a pharaoh. All right? Now, yeah, in the Bible it does tell you her name, I think eventually, right? But when you see Tutmosis, well, of course people say, oh, well, there is no similarities between the two. Oh, yes, there is. Okay? First of all, Moses' mother did not name him. Okay? Well, according to the Bible, She did not name her son. The one who gave her son a name was this princess, Egyptian princess, okay, gave the name to Moses, which is similar to Tutmosis. Now, there are other Moseses, yes, Tutmoses out there. There's Tutmosis the one first, Tutmosis the second. Okay? Now, I guess you can see in the records, it states that Tutmosis the third is son to Tutmosis the second. All right? Now, Tutmosis the first is the father of Tutmosis the second and Queen Hatshepsut. Now, yeah, I did say queen, but her name was just Hatshepsut at the time. Now, you can decide whether you want to believe it or not. Hatshepsut was a daughter of a pharaoh, as I just told you. Now, Hatshepsut would be his aunt, okay? Moses' aunt, not his mother. This woman, of course, Hatshepsut, she raised Tutmosis III. And the reason I say she raised him was because she was in relations with her brother, Tutmosis II. They were brother and sister. But obviously, there was no rules back then, I guess, so it was all right to stay within royal lineage, or rather the family, okay, of the same blood. And that's what happened. But Hatshepsut was not Tutmosis III's mother. Now, yeah, we can go on and mention a whole bunch of things that we may not agree with or may agree with, but you can look at the similarities between these stories that show you something is not right. Okay? Now think of this for a second. When you think about how huge, according to the Bible, how huge the Israelites were, right? They were big numbers of people. Numerous. And there were so much of them, there was more of them than the Egyptians. So, according to the Bible, it's saying that the Egyptians felt threatened by the large mass of Hebrews, so they decided to enslave them, okay? Whether that's true or not, you can choose to believe that's what happened, or that didn't happen. Now, there is a group that is mentioned within the Egyptian records called the Hyksos, okay? Now, of course, they didn't name themselves Hyksos. Okay, Joseph, I think Joseph the scriber and Manetho, they mentioned Hyksos. Now, Hyksos were known as foreign rulers, okay, or shepherd kings. Now, obviously, you guys know that the Israelites were known as shepherd kings. But some people may dispute the fact that if you call them foreign rulers, which they were foreign, okay, because they were not from Egypt. So these Hyksos came and they took over Egypt. And then it makes you wonder, because these people in the Bible are making themselves seem like they were the victim to these Egyptians, not conquerors. The Hyksos were conquerors, right? According to the Egyptian records, they were. So, obviously, someone is lying, or, I don't know what else to think on that one. But when you try to see, again, when you try to map out stories from the Bible into, ancient history, not many stories you can say that they're real. But when you start searching deeper into these stories, you start realizing that there really is some similarities. Now, whether you believe that Moses parted the sea or whatever, that's up to you. That doesn't mean just because I might not believe it, that doesn't mean that it didn't happen. The Hyksos were they were driven out of Egypt by Amos and Kamos. Now, we got, the book of Exodus that supposedly was written, where they're coming out because Moses saves his people, the Israelites, from the Pharaoh at that time, who they say was Ramses. Once again, you can decide whether you believe it was Ramses or some other pharaoh. In the Egyptian records, you don't see any type of exodus, only at the time of Amos and Kamos. These are two brothers, okay? And I believe they were pharaohs or princes. Prince. So you guys don't misunderstand me. They drove out these Hyksos, who dominated Egypt for several years. Okay? So anyways, back to Imhotep and whether you guys believe that this event was real. Is Imhotep Joseph, son of Jacob? I have to say that you guys have to decide for yourself whether you believe that they are one and the same man. Even though that the stories, some of the stories said by them, did not add up, you still have to think about the coincidences between two men that were not of royal blood, the only ones mentioned, okay, not of royal blood, and chosen to be second in command in Egypt because they interpreted the Pharaoh's dream. But of course, many are going to argue it and say, no, it cannot be, because as I just told you earlier, that the names of their parents are not the same. But that doesn't necessarily mean that it's not the same person just because the names of the parents seem different. Okay? Because you can say, like today, some people may say God, Jehovah, Allah, Yahweh, many different names. Just like in Egyptian times, okay, they believed in their own brand of gods. Ra, Atum, Osiris, Isis, and a whole lot more. Anubis. It's not, what I'm trying to say, guys, is that throughout these years, you can all say that it all leads to the same thing, or you can say that it does not lead to the same thing. It is your choice to believe whether it is the same thing. You can also argue the fact that Noah's story, okay, I'm sure you guys are familiar with the Noah story, that some say that's also a borrowed story from not the Egyptians, different peoples. I can't name them right now, but it seems like the stories were kind of similar. The only difference is the names were not the same, but the event was the same. Okay? Like the flood and gathering of, all the animals of the earth, gather your family and get on this huge ark. Okay? Because what's going to happen, it's going to be a big event that's going to happen, a big flood, to flood out the negative people. Once again, some may agree with this and some may disagree with this. I'm not trying to make believers of this story, because that is your choice to believe it or disbelieve it. I'm just saying that we have to use reasoning sometimes, okay, and logic, instead of just being closed-minded and not accepting anything else outside of the Bible. Because obviously in life, when you want to know about something, you're going to try to investigate it to see, the background of certain things. It's good to investigate backgrounds of stories to see where they originate from. If you don't see where they originated from and you're closed-minded to all the things that is presented to you, then how can you be, a person that have an open mind and consider the possibilities of things like this? Just like when people can think of extraterrestrials, whether they're real or not, whether they're really grays or human looking, because obviously there's people that always make claims, but they don't show any evidence of any kind. They always stuck on, oh yeah, well I had contact with an alien. Oh yeah, I had contact with a human alien. But yet they don't show you any proof. I'm just generalizing here, guys. Okay? When you want to know about something, you investigate it. And that's what I, decided for myself to look into the Imhotep Joseph supposed similarity, okay? Because I've seen many people talk about it. You also have, I think his name is Ralph Ellis, who have written books about similarities between the Israelites and these Egyptians. I mean, he goes on and says that, of course, he says Moses was a pharaoh, Joseph was a pharaoh, Jacob was a pharaoh, Abraham was a pharaoh. Again, this is not me saying it. This is Ralph Ellis in his books. Okay, how he mentions these and others similarities between the Bible stories and Egyptian records. Now, another thing we can say is that, you know how in the Bible, it looks like these people, the Israelites, keep a large percentage of their numbers. Like they do a census of their people, just like the Egyptians did, the same thing. Now, in the Bible, you can see that Moses was, I guess you can say he was a leader of a large army. He was, because obviously he had a lot of people to back him up. And he was the speaker. His brother was the priest, right? That's making Moses, I mean, in symbol, when you're looking at it symbolically, you can say that Moses was a pharaoh, okay? And his brother Aaron was a priest. All right? Now you can say priest of Yahweh, or maybe you can say priest of these Egyptian gods, right? Because we're not certain whether these stories are similar or not, whether they really coincide with each other, right? So anyways, I hope that you guys can feedback. Let me know what you believe on this story. Do you think that there is similarities between Imhotep and Joseph? Moses and Moses the third? Or any other similarities that you guys believe that you've seen that are in the Bible, but they're not? You can like the video. You can hate the video. You can subscribe if you like, if you're new to my channel. Also, I would like to say real quick that Tutmosis III was the leader of a large army. Now, yeah, we know he was not a pharaoh, Tutmosis III, because his mother, or half-mother, rather, right? His stepmother, Queen Hatshepsut, she became the queen of Egypt. Of course, later on, they started erasing her image because it is not the Egyptian way of having a female to run Egypt. It was a male figure to run Egypt, right? So, Tutmosis obviously was the one who was being raised to be a pharaoh, because that is what happened. Or if you want to believe that happened or didn't happen. I'm not saying that Moses got to be a pharaoh, because we know that he was raised by a princess, an Egyptian princess. And if you believe it was Ramses, then believe it was Ramses. If you believe it was a different pharaoh, then believe it was a different pharaoh. But the stories do coincide with each other. All right? You got a man who was not raised by his real mother. It was raised by a mother that was not his real mother. You got to have an open mind, guys, about these stories. You don't have to accept them, but consider the possibilities of these people being one and the same. I don't know what to think of it, because, I did study the Bible for 7 years. No, I'm not talking about reciting it, because people take it that it's about reciting verses. I don't recite verses. My thing was to look into the story, read into the story, because if you realize, you do happen to see that these Israelites always were near Egypt, and they always were in Egypt. Even the Messiah who you may call Jesus, or Esau, or Joshua, right? Even he was not thrown, but entered Egypt at the age of 12. And he was not he was not mentioned again until when he was 30 years old. So he was sent to Egypt by his parents, and then he comes out being 30 years old. And he died supposedly when he was 33. Okay, a high degree of master of justice. So, I mean, you have to think it through, people. All right? These people just kept talking about Egypt and their connections to Egypt. Even Abraham went into Egypt. Okay? I'm sure you guys remember that, when Abraham went into Egypt. So it doesn't just start with Joseph. It starts with his ancestors before him, obviously. And that should make people think, why were they going in and out of Egypt? Now, I did wanted to see, the similarities between Goshen and Avarice. Avarice being the place where the Hyksos, supposedly that was their big headquarters. I'm saying it this way, but that's not how anyone else say it. I'm just saying it that way. I don't know whether Goshen was a real place, or it could have been one and the same with Avarice, the place of the Hyksos. Now, there's Lower Egypt and there's Upper Egypt. I think they had both, Upper and Lower Egypt. But Lower Egypt was more where they were at until they, I guess, dominated and became two kingdoms. Again, we can conclude a whole bunch of different things. But for me, if the Bible stories have no, evidence to back up, the story, it's hard for us to just be like, oh, okay, it happened. Moses parted the sea. Okay, Moses parted the sea. Okay, Moses changed the color of the water, okay, to red, to blood, and all these grasshoppers and all that. So Moses was able to do the same thing that these supposed wizards of Egypt were doing. Yes, mages. Okay, I don't want to get too technical, guys, but let me just say wizards for now. Because whatever they did, supposedly Moses was able to do. Again, you have to realize also that throughout history, okay, people have, you can say, deified many characters, or even a little bit exaggeration on certain stories. Like you can say, let me give you an example. Zeus. If you're familiar with the story of how his mother exchanged him for a rock because his father, Cronus, was swallowing all the other children. So that kind of didn't make sense, because if that's the case, then how is it that we still see Poseidon as the god of the sea? You see Hades as the god of hell, right? Tartarus, and others. You guys get the point. You got Ares, the god of war, who happens to be Zeus's son. Anyways, I'm just saying, a lot of these things don't add up. It doesn't. And there are some stories that are a little bit exaggerated. Like Samson, for instance, right? You may believe that Samson was a real person and his power was in his hair. Now, it's kind of hard to believe that these stories really took place. Now, Samson reminds me of Hercules, all right? Son of Zeus. Hercules was a god / regular human. All right, he was able to possess, I guess, strength from the gods. So that part of him made him who he was. Samson, Samson of the Bible, that is, his power was in his hair. I'm not saying that Hercules was the same in terms of his hair, that if you cut his hair, he loses his power. See, that's the thing. these stories do sound somewhat exaggerated, so that the people after the fact will believe in a hero. Okay? So they can just say, oh, this guy was great. And they give you a nice story how, the female who was supposed to be his partner, and she was constantly asking him about his power. Where does his power lie? So he would lie, okay, just to see if he can trust her. Because that was basically the whole story behind the Samson story when it comes to him and his partner, the female. I forgot her name, so I'm sorry, guys. And he tested her. She failed, of course, because when he didn't tell her, she says, damn, you don't love me then because you're not telling me the truth. Now, he was trying to test her loyalty to him. And obviously, she was not loyal because every single time she would try to set him up. And then lastly, because I guess she got her way with him, he decided to believe that, okay, I could trust her now. Maybe he still knew that he can't trust her because remember, she deceived him twice. So he said, yeah, it's in my hair. Like, if I cut the locks of my hair, I lose my strength. And that's exactly what happened. But my point here is, guys, that the story just sounds like a hero for the Israelites. Just like Enoch, for instance, all right? You don't see much of Enoch. In the book of Enoch, you see, but of course some people don't accept that. Enoch was a character who supposedly was and then was not, because he went with God, or Yahweh, or Jehovah, or Allah. So I guess he just went up. I guess the same thing with Elijah. He went up. But went up where? You see? So you can say that the story might have been a little exaggerated. Just so that people can have a little more faith in these stories. Or in the God of the Israelites. But I guess you guys can decide from there, because we can go on for longer videos to discuss the fact that, that may not happen and may not happen. But I do have an open mind because, again, as I'm saying, every ancient people of back then had their own branch of gods. And I know everybody's going to say, well, his God is the same God as yours. But if you go back put yourself into the ancient times when all those peoples in ancient times were there, and you put yourself in those positions, then you realize that every culture had their own gods. Why? We can't really explain that though. Okay? The Egyptians had their own brand of gods, as I mentioned. They have hundreds of their gods. You got the people before them, hundreds of their gods. Everyone had their own branch of gods. Even the Chinese, I guess the Koreans, Japanese, I can keep going. India, they have their own gods. You can say there's more. There's more, guys. There's more. I mean, the Greek, as I just said, the Greek gods, Roman gods. You have the Norse gods. You see, so this is something that didn't start here and today. This is something that always was. But people don't accept that because the reality of today is that the Bible is, and that's it. That there is no other authority but this Bible. But people don't consider the fact that this might have been a historical, I guess you could say, record of the Israelites. Okay? How they came to be, how they had their laws, how they had their God. But again, you guys can choose to believe whatever you like. I'm just saying that, sometimes we have to open our minds, expand it. Okay? And that's what makes us unique. That's what makes us unique. Because we get to, believe what you want. Whether you choose to believe something is accurate or inaccurate or whatever, at least you considered that it might be a possibility. Everything is a possibility. You can never... Of course, the skeptics on this planet are always going to have a closed mind because they're not going to be open-minded to possibilities. We would, right? Some of us would. We're more open-minded than a skeptic would. A skeptic would just deny the whole thing altogether. And they will, of course, conclude that there's nothing, there's no God, there's anything, nothing. And that's just how it is with them. Because they don't have the open mind to expand their train of thought. But hey, everyone's different, right, guys? If indeed we got free will, I guess free will is whatever you want. You can either choose to do something good with that free will, or you can abuse it, like many do anyways. I do struggle with that because I believe that man, or rather humanity, not all of us, some of us, abuse free will. Free will doesn't mean that you get to enslave people. Free will doesn't mean that you get to be better than people. Free will doesn't mean that you have to be richer than everyone else. But I guess everything has a consequence in due time. Whether you believe that there's a judgment day coming or not. Eventually, people will get to see that in due time, when their time comes, their love for materialism, hey, it's going to be a disappointment because they're not going to be able to take that with them. The gold, the cars, the big riches, the mansions, that's not going to go with them. So anyways, guys, I just try to make a point, that we have to have an open mind about these stories and anything else that you come across. It doesn't matter whether it's my YouTube channel or anyone else's channel or books that you read or lectures that you go to, or it doesn't matter. Anything in life. It's your choice to decide whether you want to embrace it or just let it go altogether and just don't embrace nothing and become a skeptic. Me personally, I choose to be an open-minded person, and I rather, even if I'm wrong, I don't care. As long as I decided to expand my mind to everything. Consider the possibilities. Whether I agree with something or disagree with something, I'm going to still consider the possibility. So I know many people will be like, well, you said this about this other stuff. And yeah, but that doesn't mean that you have to believe it. When I spoke about the story about the astronauts, okay, the American astronauts that went to the moon. Whether you believe they went or not, it doesn't matter, guys. That's what I'm getting at. Whether you believe that valiant Thor, okay, was real when I told you it's not real, I went based on facts that the man is not real. It was a normal human being named Frank Ernest Stranges who tried to pass himself as a person of planet Venus. But that's not what we're talking about. I'm just generalizing to show you guys that it's whether you wish to accept something or not. It's your choice. I'm not trying to seek people to believe everything I'm saying. You can choose to believe or not. Consider the possibilities, though. Don't be so close-minded to everything because you never know. What if this was true? What if Imhotep and Joseph were one and the same person? What if Tutmosis III and Moses were the same person? You never know. You never know. So anyways, guys, I'm going to close this video here. I hope that I was able to be clear. If not, I apologize, because that's not my attempt. Again, it's not my attempt to confuse anyone. And so with that, I say peace, guys. And hopefully I come back with another video and a different topic, perhaps, because I do want to do an update on the Tom DeLonge story. Definitely an update on that one. So with this one, I'm going to close, and I see you guys next time.